So, I want to talk today about something that I think a lot of people are actually in the middle of right now and maybe just don't have the language for it. Okay. Like that feeling where things just feel off, like not necessarily bad, but not necessarily good, right? Just different. Okay. Like something has shifted and you're trying to figure out what it is and where you stand and maybe what God is doing and why everything feels like it's moving slower than it should or even not moving at all. Maybe some relationships have changed. Maybe some doors have closed that you didn't expect to close, or maybe you've pulled back from certain environments, or certain environments have pulled back from you. Maybe you're quieter than usual, more internal, more introspective, and less connected to the things and people and places that used to feel like home. And now you're asking God, what is this? Like, what are you doing in this season? Did I miss something? Am I being disciplined? Did I do something wrong? Is it warfare? Or is it transitioning? Just asking what is happening. And I want to try to give you the language today for what you're in, because you're in a season of realignment and recalibration. And I want to talk about what that actually looks like, because it's not always what we think it is, and it does not always look the way that we expect it to. Okay. In fact, most of the time, it looks like the opposite of what we think God moving in our lives would look like. So I want you to come on in, hit the like button as you come in, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Okay. And I'm going to dive into this starting with defining realignment. Okay. Because I want us working from the same level of understanding. All right. Realignment is exactly what it sounds like. It's God bringing us back into the correct position, back into order, back into the original design and intention that He had for your life before things got shifted, right? By choices, by seasons, by the enemy, by environments, relationships, or even by your own growth. I want you to think about it this way. Okay. When your car is out of alignment, you might not even notice at first that it's out of alignment, right? You're driving, things seem fine, okay? But over time, you start to feel the car pulling in a direction that is different from the direction that you're trying to go. The steering begins to feel off, and if you ignore it long enough, it starts to affect other things. So now the tires begin to wear down unevenly, and the handling of the car gets worse until the whole ride just becomes harder than what it needs to be. You take it in. The mechanic doesn't add anything new to the car. He doesn't replace the engine. He doesn't overhaul the whole vehicle. He simply adjusts what has drifted from where it was supposed to be. And that's realignment. God is not scrapping you. He is not starting over. He is not punishing you. He is adjusting what is drifted to bring you back into position, or back into the posture, the relationships, the assignments, and the mindset that align with where He is taking you. And recalibration is the internal component of that, right? It's the reset of your spiritual sensitivity, your discernment, your priorities, the way that you hear God, the way that you process what is happening around you. It's God fine-tuning the instrument so that when He speaks, you can actually hear clearly And so that when he moves, you are able to recognize it. Both of these things are necessary, and both of them can be quite uncomfortable. Because here's the thing, y'all, about alignment, right? When something has been in the wrong position for long enough, moving it back into the right position can absolutely feel wrong. It can feel like disruption or like loss or like God is taking something away when what he is actually doing is repositioning you. And that's what I want to talk about today. Because I think a lot of people in this season right now are misreading it. They are thinking that it is one thing when it's really something else. And that is a disservice to your journey. So I want to walk you through what this season can actually look like. And I want you to be honest with yourself as I go through these, because I believe that at least one of these, or maybe more, okay, is going to sound exactly like someone's life right now. It can look like loss. And I want to be sensitive here because loss is real and loss is painful. And I'm not going to minimize that ever. But I want to offer you a different lens, a higher perspective. Sometimes what feels like loss in a season of realignment is actually God removing what was never meant to stay. Relationships that were comfortable but not covenant, or environments that were familiar but not fruitful, versions of yourself that you had outgrown but were still holding on to because they were safe. Psalm 23, and it's one of my favorite scriptures of Psalm, okay, because it's so much deeper than the credit that it gets. It says that the Lord is our shepherd and he leads us beside the still waters. He restores our soul. He leads us in the paths of righteousness. The word leads implies movement. It implies that God is taking you somewhere. And sometimes in order to get you from where you are to where he's leading you, things have to be released, right? Things have to fall away, not because they were bad, but sometimes simply because they belong to the last chapter and not to the next one, or because they belong to a version of you that no longer exists anymore. The loss is real. So yes, grieve what needs to be grieved, but don't allow grief to convince you that you're moving backward when God is actually moving you forward. It can also look like things falling apart, okay? And this one is hard because when things are falling apart, when the structure you built, the plan you had, and the thing that you worked for begins to unravel, it can be very difficult to see that as God's hand. It can feel like failure, and it can feel like the ground is being pulled from under you, but I want you to take Hebrews chapter 12, verse 27 into consideration, because this is God speaking through the writer of Hebrews. And he says this phrase, yet once more, indicates the removing of things that can be shaken. That is, things that have been made in order that the things that cannot be shaken may remain. I want you to read that verse carefully. Meditate on that verse. God removes what can be shaken so that what remains is what cannot be shaken. Sometimes what is falling apart in your life It's falling apart because it was built on a foundation that could not hold the weight of where God is taking you. Not because you failed, not because God has abandoned the vision, but because the structure needed to be rebuilt on something more solid. And so I want you to think about a building that needs a stronger foundation. You don't just add the new foundation on top of the old one. You have to go down. You have to remove what's there. You have to dig. And it is in the middle of that process. It looks like destruction. It looks like everything is being torn down, but the builder knows that what is being torn down is making way for something that will last, something that will stand firm and stand strong. If things are falling apart around you right now, I challenge you to ask God one question. God, what are you trying to build that requires a stronger foundation than what I currently have? And wait on that answer. This can also look like isolation, okay? And this one is one of the most misunderstood dimensions of a realignment season, because isolation can sometimes feel like rejection, right? Sometimes it can feel like abandonment, or like everyone has moved on and left you behind. Sometimes it feels like God went quiet and people went distant, right? And you're like in this in-between space that doesn't really have a clear name. But isolation in a season of realignment is often, not always, okay, but very often, protective formation. Okay? Because God separates what he is about to use. God consecrates what he is about to use. I want you to look at every major figure in scripture who carried significant assignment. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before the burning bush. David spent years running and hiding before the throne. Paul had 3 years in Arabia after his conversion, before he began his public ministry. And Jesus himself spent 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness before his public ministry began. The isolation was not punishment, it was preparation, right? God was doing something in the hidden place that could not be done in the crowd. He was building something in private that would be needed in the public. So if you're in a season of isolation right now, if you feel like you've been pulled back from people, from community, from the noise, I want you to ponder this. What has God been saying to you in the quiet? Because if you've been using the isolation to spiral, right? Like to rehearse rejection and replay what went wrong, or to wonder what's wrong with you, you may be missing what God is actually trying to do in that space. Okay. The wilderness is not a destination, but it is necessary, y'all. And what you receive in it is what you will need when you come out. Next, it can look like a pause. Okay. Some are in a season where nothing is moving, seemingly, right? And I mean nothing. Like, you're praying, you're faithful, you're doing what God said to do, you're being obedient, and it just feels like everything is on hold, like everything is just stagnant, right? Like you hit a pause button that you didn't press, and you don't know when it's going to unpause. Can I tell you something about the pause, though? It's not a stop. It's not a stop, but it is intentional. When a musician is reading a piece of music, for example, okay, there are periods of rests written into the score, right? Places where there is no sound, and those rests are not mistakes. They are not the composer forgetting to write notes. They are written in on purpose because the silence is a part of the music. The pause creates anticipation. The pause allows what just happened to land. The pause sets up what's coming next. God authors the pause. Habakkuk 2:3 tells us, for the vision is yet for an appointed time. It hastens toward the goal, and it will not fail. Though it tarries, wait for it, for it will certainly come. It will not delay. The appointed time is already set. The vision is never canceled. The promise is not revoked. There is a moment already written on the calendar of heaven when what God said is going to happen happens. The pause is not God being slow, it's God being precise. So stay faithful even in the pause, because what is being aligned in the pause is what is going to make the next moment sustainable. And finally, it can look like doors closing. And I want to be careful about this one, okay, because I know that a closed door can feel like rejection. I know that many people deal with rejection, okay, as a wound, and that is rooted spiritually, okay. So I want to deal with this one carefully, because it's not like God is saying no to something that you really wanted, right? Like you prayed and you believed and positioned yourself, right, for this thing, and the door still didn't open for you, or it closed after you thought it was open. And I understand that that can hurt. I understand how that can feel. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Okay. But again, I want to give you a different perspective, a higher perspective that I believe is scriptural and I believe is true. Not every closed door is a no. Some closed doors are a not yet. Some closed doors are a no, not that way. And some closed doors are God's divine protection over something that you cannot fully see yet. Revelations chapter 3 verse 7 says that Jesus is the one who opens doors no man can shut, and shuts doors that no man can open. So if God closed the door, there's no amount of pushing or manipulating or positioning that's going to open it, right? And if you spend all of your energy trying to force open what God has closed, you will exhaust yourself and miss the whole door that He's actually opening for you. Here's what I've learned about closed doors in a realignment season, right? Sometimes the door closed because you outgrew what was on the other side of it. Sometimes it closed because the environment behind it would have limited what God was trying to do in you. Okay. And sometimes it closes because God has a better door. Simply put, a door that is more aligned with where He's actually taking you. And He needed to close this one so that you would be available when the other door opens. The closed door is not the end of the story. It is the redirection. Trust the one who holds the key. Okay. Now, I want to talk quickly about how to navigate a season of realignment. I'm going to give 5 steps before we get into the conclusion of this video. Okay. These are practical things, right? Because I don't want this to just be something that resonated with you and then you go back to your life and don't know what to do with the information. Okay. So Practicality is the thing. Number one, stop fighting the season, right? And I know that sounds simple. I know that it's easier said than done, but it's not simple, okay? One of the biggest mistakes people make in a realignment season is spending all of their energy trying to resist or trying to get back what was, instead of just cooperating with what God is doing, instead of just yielding to what he is doing, instead of just embracing what is. Okay, listen, y'all, the sooner you stop resisting and start surrendering to the process, the more productive the season becomes. Fighting realignment is like fighting the current of a river. You'll exhaust yourself and you don't go anywhere. So surrendering to it while staying prayerful, while still discerning, that is what allows God to actually move for you and to move you where he's trying to take you. Number two, protect your peace, even in the pause, okay? Because a season of recalibration requires stillness, and stillness is hard when everything in you wants answers or wants movement or wants resolution. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." The stillness is not passivity, okay? It is a posture of trust and faith, and it is saying, God, I don't understand what you're doing right now, okay? But I trust you, and I trust that you are doing something. I trust what you are doing, and I'm going to guard my peace in this season instead of allowing anxiety and confusion to drown out what you're trying to say. Number three, let go of what God is removing. This is another hard one because, again, some of what God is removing in this season, we're holding on to with both hands and for dear life, for whatever reason, okay? Because we love it, because it's familiar, because we built it, because we feel like it's ours. We don't fully understand why it needs to go. But I want to give you a piece of truth. You cannot receive what God has for your next chapter with your hands full of what belonged to your last chapter. Let go, grieve it properly, and then open your hands. Next, number 4, stay in the word and stay in prayer. And I know that sounds obvious, okay? It sounds super obvious, but I mean it specifically like this, right? A recalibration season is a season where God is resetting your spiritual sensitivity, and that reset requires input. It requires you to be in the word, not just reading it, but letting it read you. Letting it challenge the narratives that you've been carrying and correct what has been drifted. And prayer in this season is less about asking and more about listening. It's less about presenting your list and more about sitting in the presence of God long enough to hear what he is saying about the season that you are in. I need you to keep that in mind. And finally, number 5, trust the process even when you can't see the product. This is the faith dimension. And I want to be honest, it's the hardest part. Because faith by definition is being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you do not see, according to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. You may not be able to see what God is building right now. You may not be able to see where the realignment is taking you. You may not be able to see why the door closed or why the season is long or why the isolation has stretched for as far as it has, but God sees the finished product. And he's working from the end backward, and he doesn't make mistakes. So your only job is to trust the process, even when, and especially when, you cannot see the product. Okay? And finally, I want to close with this. If you are in a season of realignment, okay, as many of us are, If you recognize yourself in any of what I have talked about today, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not lost. You are not behind. You are not being punished. You are not forgotten. You are being repositioned, and repositioning is uncomfortable. It is disorienting. It can feel like loss and falling apart and isolation and pause and closed doors and all of those things all at the same time. And all of those things can absolutely be true all at the same time. And even in the midst of it, God can still be in complete control of every single one of those things. The realignment is not the end of the story, okay? It's the setup for the next chapter, and the next chapter requires you to be in the right position. It requires you to be in the right relationships, the right mindset, the right spiritual posture, okay? In order for you to be able to carry what God is about to release. So I urge you to cooperate with it. I urge you to surrender to it. I urge you to trust the one who is doing it, because he knows what he is building, and he is building something that will last. So I urge you to stay clear. And that's all I have for this video, guys. Y'all stay blessed, stay up, stay in faith. Peace.